Chapter 37, The Punishment of the Sun Sulfalena, 338 solar year. The song from his mother's music box echoed in his mind. Laszlo opened his eyes. He was in a very familiar place. For he was inside the small dimensional tunnel of his own true rune. The walls of the tunnel were composed of a glowing dark red and black mist that seemed to rotate in a counterclockwise motion. Far down the tunnel he saw a strange light. As he approached it, the gentle melody grew louder. The light became more clearly defined as he got closer. Soon a person's shape could be made out. The ageless man saw before him the familiar face of his mother. Just like her prior visits, she was shrouded in a strange green light as she stared at her son, wordlessly. The twin swordsman just watched her and smiled, even if she couldn't. Laszlo began to recall how he got here. Just prior to everything around him going dark, he had been battling Nyoka. The rune of punishment and the sun rune had been engaged in a titanic clash of unbridled power. Nyoka had tipped the stalemate in his favor by adding the dawn and twilight runes to his own attack. However, the 108 stars of destiny had somehow shown up just when Laszlo needed them the most, and they shared their strength with him. This restored the balance of the blasts until Nyoka's artificial vessel could not handle channeling power on that scale anymore. There was an explosion and now Laszlo was here. "Am I dead?" He asked the question again out loud to his mother. She remained there silent, unable to answer him as usual. Her son reached out his hand to hers, but it passed right through her. She was just a memory after all. Trapped inside the rune of punishment. Really, no more than a ghost or a shadow of the past. Laszlo sighed in exasperation as he wasn't sure what to do or why he was here. Suddenly, his mother did the most remarkable thing. She smiled and placed her hands together as though she were about to pray. As she did this, the green aura around her body started to glow more intensely. Another light appeared next to her. The man who stepped out of it was his father, King Lino. He looked about the same age as he had when Laszlo fought with him during the island's liberation war. And not as the old, more distinguished man Laszlo remembered from later in his life. The Obel monarch smiled at Laszlo, giving him the thumbs up sign. Amazingly, more strange lights began to appear as well. Dozens and dozens of them. People of all shapes and sizes began to pour out of them. Just as they had done in his duel with Nyoka. All 107 of them were again gathering around him. During his duel, he had not been able to really get a good look at them, but now he could. Like the king, they all looked about the same ages as when Laszlo had first known most of them from his days during the war. Some of these people were already dead, like Snow, Eleanor, Kika, Aldo, and Warlock. But others were still alive, like Flair, Dal, Paula, and many others. Even Desmond and Tanya were here too, but in their much younger versions. Like his parents, none of them could talk with words. However, many gestured with waving, bowing, clapping, and several other non-verbal ways to indicate they were all proud of him. He was a bit embarrassed by all the fanfare, but he was just glad to see them all. A very emotional Laszlo simply said, "Thank you everyone. Thank you, so much." While that was occurring, a blue sphere appeared and soon a projection of Leknat emerged in the midst of the crowd. "Leknat, did you do all of this? Did you bring all these people here to help me stop Nyoka? I thought I felt your presence during the battle for a brief moment there," a puzzled islander declared. The projection of the blind old seer replied, "Greetings, keeper of the rune of atonement and forgiveness. Once again you have answered the call of destiny. You overcame this ancient darkness. You are truly a man of amazing resolve. As for your question, these people have always been here, living inside of you. Living in your memories, in your heart, and even in your very soul. These people are forever a part of you. They have been since the day they freely chose to follow you, Tenkai Star. All I did was merely open the door for them to remind you of that fact." Laszlo looked at her curiously before saying, "Thank you for that. I couldn't have defeated him without your help and theirs." She answered, "I only did that which I have always done, seek to keep balance in this world. What happens now? Asked Laszlo as he looked around this strange tunnel as all his friends silently watched on as the two conversed. Leknath responded, you may live or you can pass over to the other side. It is the same choice you have always had before you, Rune Bearer. He looked at his friends, then to his parents, and finally Laszlo looked at the rune of punishment on his left hand and sighed, if I decide to pass on, would the rune return to the world harvesting souls as it did once before? Leknath nodded her head yes. Laszlo's head, meanwhile, fell in despair and uncertainty. I don't know what to do, mumbled the tired old warrior. Do you still have a reason to return to that world? She asked pensively. He closed his eyes and began to think of what was still worth living for. Then, he heard it. A new voice filled the tunnel of light. It was Alinda's. She was calling out his name, Laszlo, Laszlo, Laszlo. The islander was about to say something, when suddenly he felt a strong force pull him down. He was falling. Then, crack, he felt the sudden impact of his body hitting the ground. A soothing feeling came over him moments later as he felt some kind of magical spell healing him. Laszlo opened his eyes. There was Alinda and everyone else looking over him. And while you know the rest, Syra and Rose already explained it to you guys better than I could. I was still pretty out of it, anyhow, finished the Federation ambassador. Having just recounted to his two old friends all that had happened to him since they had last seen each other. Tanya and Desmond were speechless. They couldn't believe it. Tanya suggested that perhaps Laszlo had been merely dreaming. Moreover, she couldn't get her mind wrapped around how she could be here in the real world, yet somehow her younger self had appeared to help Laszlo win his battle. Laszlo was quick to dismiss this hypothesis. He explained to them that there was a huge difference between what a mere dream felt like and what an experience from his true rune was capable of doing. The grandfatherly Desmond believed Laszlo's story. He was happy to hear his old master and friend, King Lino, was in good spirits. Well, sort of, he laughed to himself. The trio spent the rest of the night reminiscing, and speculating about what the Queen would say tomorrow. Laszlo had a feeling he knew, but at that moment he didn't care. All that mattered to him right now was just enjoying the company of his close friends. The morning sun arose in the Quendom. Alinda was unsure of what was going to happen to her. Soon her parents would summon her and the rest before the throne. Then, she would have to give a public account of all she had done leading up to the battle with Nyoka. For she had taken the Dawn Rune without her parents' approval. This was high treason under Falainian law for a normal person, and carried with it only one punishment. Queen Elimar called them all into the audience chamber. Alinda grabbed Laszlo's hand for comfort and strength as they walked through the large doors into the throne room. This action was not lost on any of the eyes of the nobles who were present at the royal court that day. Alinda was surprised to see Amos Sparrows kneeling before the queen. Quickly, he got out of the way as the new party entered the room. He took a place near the side of a wall. The younger princess made eye contact with him. She could tell he had been crying. Because, his eyes were red and puffy, but now he seemed pleased with himself. Amos bit his lower lip in annoyance when he saw the two holding hands. However, his smug grin returned shortly after that as though some secret thought was now entertaining him. Concurrently, there was much clapping, whistling, and celebration by many in the crowds as the heroes of the moment entered the room. They were victorious, having defeated the rogue Nagarian priest. The same priest who had caused a civil war in one nation and nearly overthrew another. He had killed a queen's knight, kidnapped two members of the royal family, and had stolen the 3 runes of Falena. But, now he was gone, forever. Defeated by those now standing before the monarch. Commander Aelin rose from his throne, walked down and hugged both his daughters and shook hands with Ambassador Laszlo, before reassuming his seat by the queen's right side. Godwin, who was standing next to an empty chair that was positioned next to the queen's left side, gestured to his wife. Syra stepped forward. He bowed to her in a very ceremonial way before kissing her hand. The audience ate it up as she took the left chair next to her mother. The whole thing was theatre to Godwin. He would show his true affections for his wife later. Elimark was, also, elated to see her daughters safe once more. But she didn't remove herself from the throne. She stayed seated, remaining regal and proper in such a full company of senators and nobles alike. The queen raised her hand to gesture for silence. Immediately, a quiet hush fell over the crowd. Elimark stated in a voice that sounded greatly conflicted, "Island Nations Federation Ambassador Laszlo N. Kultis, step before the throne, please." Laszlo let go of her hand. He, himself, was not afraid. He had spent more than enough time with political figures and royal officials to not be intimidated by their status. Plus, after all he had just been through, this was hardly anything by comparison. However, the look on Ishan's face did catch his gaze. He approached the throne and bowed before Queen Elimark. He couldn't help but notice her as well. Under all the gold jewels and fancy silk clothes, she was still quite lovely in appearance. She looked like an older version of Alinda, only her eyes were brown, whereas Alinda's were blue like Aelin's. Other than that, Alinda was the very spitting image of her mother with her slender figure and beautiful platinum hair. However, these thoughts were quickly pushed away as the queen began to speak in a more decisive voice now. She started off by saying, "First, on behalf of the whole Quendom of Falena, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for saving both our daughters once again. Plus, for your assistance in recovering the 3 runes of Falena. Moreover, you stood and fought with this country. A country not your own in her darkest hour of need. And when danger called, you answered. Nyoko and his forces have been defeated in no small part thanks to you and that rune on your left hand." Laszlo was a bit surprised that she knew about his true rune. But, the more he thought about it, the more likely it seemed she would know about it by now, he reasoned. Seeing the surprise in his eyes, Elimark added, "Yes, my husband has told me many wonderful tales of daring and bravery going back several decades about you and your rune." There was a bit of murmuring in the crowd at these cryptic words being shared by the queen. However, it was quickly quelled as Elimark raised her hand again, insisting on silence. "Regardless of the past," she continued, "I fear to think of where we would be right now without your help over this past year. Lost to the shadows. Yes, I have no doubt your arrival was indeed the will of the sun in order to save these lands. But, with all that being said, I am still the queen. It is my job to uphold justice and the laws of this land. So, I will ask you one time and one time only. Did you have a hand in stealing the Dawn rune from East Balas?" she asked with great hesitation in her voice. The whole room instantly grew as quiet as the grave as all eyes fell upon Laszlo. He looked at Alinda and then at the other 2 ambassadors. With no fear or excuses or to try and justify himself, he said calmly 2 words, "I did." A gasp filled the room as they all knew what that meant. "Then you confess to your crime? Despite knowing that in our land, such an act of stealing is considered treasonous?" she asked slowly. "I do," he replied, calmly. "Mother, please wait. He only did it because I asked." Alinda pleaded with her. "Alinda, be silent. I will deal with you in a moment," she retorted firmly. Her mother's words seemed to shatter Alinda, as the full weight of what was about to happen to them filled her heart with dread. "Very well, I will give you my verdict in a moment, but first I want to hear from my daughter too. Princess Alinda Falena, step forward," she commanded. Whatever calmness she had managed to maintain with Laszlo disappeared as her own daughter approached the steps of the throne in judgment. A tear started to drip from the monarch's cheek. Alinda, in tears, likewise, confessed to having a part in taking the Dawn rune. Even if it was to save Syra's life. She made no pretenses about this. In addition, she made it clear that Rose had told her not to do it, but that Alinda had ordered her to help and remain silent about it. She added, "Rose is innocent in all of this. She as a Queen's Knight was only following the orders I gave her as of a member of the royal family." The female queen's knight wanted to step forward and protest this version of the truth, by confessing her own guilt in the matter. However, Alinda gave her a look that said, "No, don't do it." So, Rose remained silent for the rest of the proceedings. After that, a full account had been given to the events leading to the taking of the Dawn Rune, and how the battle with Nyoka had unfolded. Thus, at last, Queen Elamark was ready to render her full judgment. Nevertheless, with sadness in her eyes, the queen rose to her feet and declared, "This is my verdict. The crime of high treason has only one punishment under our laws." "Mother, please!" yelled Syra with an outburst of emotion. The queen turned to her and said, "Being queen, my daughter, means making the right choices even when they are hard. Or even personal. Now sit back down and learn." The future ruler sat down in her seat as her mother resumed speaking. "As I was saying, there is one punishment alone for such a crime. However, given the circumstances for why you did this." She paused to take in a deep breath before she continued, "Sir Laszlo, your deeds have been weighted against your part in this matter, and I have changed your sentence. You are henceforth banished from the Quendom of Falena for the rest of your life. Your rank as ambassador of the island nations is no longer recognized by the throne. Thus, your diplomatic immunity to our laws is null and void. The rest I'll leave to your own nation's government." The queen concluded, "Your two peers, however, having committed no crimes, are still recognized by the throne as the official representatives of their nation. Thus, our treaties are still in full effect. But, you sir, you are hereby exiled from the Quendom. You must never return. Do you swear to abide by this decree?" Laszlo nodded calmly, "I will." All eyes now turned toward Alinda. The Queen of Falena looked at her and with brokenness in her voice, "My daughter, you are not some foreigner nor just a citizen of this land. You are its princess. You know our laws and traditions better than most. Thus, your accountability to the three runes of Falena and to this throne is higher than all others, save for myself and your sister. Thus, this is my verdict: you are hereby stripped of all titles, authority, and rank as a member of the royal family of this realm. As such, any inheritances and personal claims to the throne as a possible queen are hereby null and void." Tears streamed down both women's faces as she went on. "Not only is the rank of princess taken from you. So, too, is the family name of Falenas. Lastly, I hereby exile you from this land. Never again to return." Elamark could say no more as she had to sit back down overcome by emotion. Aelin spoke up to finish the decree, "As such, my daughter," his voice was shaken, "I mean, Alinda, your engagement to Lord Amos Barrows has been rescinded. Despite this, the Barrows family has still agreed to donate the Poch for the construction of a colony on the island of Nirva, for the agreement of the original treaty to the Quendom. However, instead of marriage, the Barrows family shall receive many exclusive trade rights and the revenue that comes with them. Any goods bought or sold upon completion of the new colony will be done so in the Barrows-influenced harbour town of Istrais. That is all. You both have 3 days to get the rest of your affairs in order. Then, you both must leave this country. Forever." Aelin was heartbroken as well after he concluded with these words. Alinda was speechless. So much was happening all at once. It would be many months before she would fully realize the nuances of how many political schemes had played themselves out on this day. But right here, right now, none of that mattered to her. She had just lost her whole world and everything she had ever known and cared about. Was this really better than death, she thought. The former princess, broken-hearted, asked, "Mother, is there anything I can do or say that would make you change your mind?" All eyes, still stunned from her verdict, turned toward the queen. Elamark, likewise, full of brokenness in her voice, wiped away the remaining tear in her eye and declared, "I am sorry, my precious one. I am truly sorry. This is how it must be. This is No, this is the punishment of the sun. Thus, what has been said, will be carried out." Alinda turned and looked at everyone and everything one last time before she walked out of the large room. Her final words before leaving were, "May my people never forget, let our mercy as deep as the Fatus and our authority as powerful as the sun be revealed to the entire world." With that she and Laszlo left the Sun Palace. Alan placed his hand on his wife's arm and replied quietly, "You did what you had to do. She is a strong and smart girl, she will see that one day. Besides, I know he, looking at Laszlo, is a good man. He loves her. He will protect her. I am certain of that much." Elimark replied in her own whispery tone, "I pray the sun's blessings on both of them. I love you, my daughter. Farewell." Syra was still astonished by what had just occurred. After hearing her mother's words, she began to wonder if she would have that sort of inner strength, herself, one day when she became queen. Over the next few days, several more emotional goodbyes to many good friends were had. Until at last, Alinda and Laszlo left on a new journey together as their ship departed from the Quendom of Falena. Alinda didn't stop watching Istrais until the city and the whole country, itself, were completely out of sight over the horizon. Laszlo looked at her. He wasn't sure what to say. So, he just put his hand in hers and said nothing. Soon, a small group of dolphins could be seen and heard swimming next to the large ship as it sailed across the ocean waves. A member of the crew walked up to them. "Excuse me. Sir, madam, I am sorry to interrupt you. But, the captain wanted me to tell you. He's aware of your special circumstances, and if there is anything we can do over these next 3 weeks to make your trip to Obel a comfortable one, please, don't hesitate to ask." Both nodded and thanked him and the captain for their kindness. After the crewman walked away, Alinda looked at Laszlo and smiled a happy expression. She asked, "So, that guy mentioned Wobble. What is it like there? And these island nations of yours, will you take me to see all of them? Can we visit Rosral too? I want to see where you grew up." Laszlo smiled with joy as he said, "Alinda, you just wait. I will show you everything. This is going to be a great adventure, just like you always wanted." It had been nearly a year since Nyoka's plan had been thwarted and life in the Quendom was beginning to return to normal. In fact, most in the capital city were celebrating the birth of a new baby girl born to Commander Marcus and Princess Syra. Young Princess Shemishaw was the talk of the whole country. She was considered by all to be the blessing from heaven. As the firstborn female, she was destined to one day be queen after Elimark and Syra had passed on. Marcus walked into the room. He saw his daughter and wife sitting in a chair. She was humming while she rocked the baby to sleep. Syra carefully rose to her feet and placed the baby in her crib next to their bed. She walked to her husband and greeted him with a kiss. Then asked, "How did your private meeting with the senators go?" Godwin smirked callously before reaching for a bottle and glass. As he was pouring a glass of his favorite wine, he spoke quietly, "Those idiots forget who they are dealing with. They think that just because Barrows has sway in Istrais, they just thought that all the profits that will flow into our country now from the island nations, will be his." I reminded them that Istrais isn't the only ocean harbor in this country. I plan on making full use of your father's wedding gift to us. I'll make sure Hirschville becomes just as powerful and prosperous as Barrow's little port town. Syra quizzically asked, "How? It is faster to travel from Nerva to Istrais. How will you get Obel's cargo ships to travel to the other side of the country and dock in Hirschville?" Godwin replied, "Simple, I still have a few friends on the Obel Maritime Council. I used to think that partnering with them would make Falena weak by being dependent on another. So, I had them work to oppose the treaty between our two nations." Marcus downed his drink and then added, "But, now I see a greater truth. Gaining power is one thing, but keeping it is another animal, altogether. No, to keep power and compete with Barrows, we will need every advantage we can get." He looked at his sleeping daughter. "Your family's legacy is secure for several more decades. But, my family's legacy has only just begun. The Ethelbald's control of Stormfist is nearly gone. The city is as good as mine at this point. Today, I promised to give those greedy nobles what they have wanted for years: gladiatorial entertainment. In exchange for that, they will speak on my behalf in the Senate. That will help ensure that trade will be conducted in Hirschville as well," concluded Godwin. Syra stood behind her husband and started rubbing his shoulders. "Gladiators? That would effectively make them slaves in the Quendom. I suppose I can help you out with that. In these days of uncertainty and possible looming war with Nagara, the people need a good distraction. What's better than cheap and mindless entertainment like that to make them forget their simple problems for a time? They'll love you even more. After all, you are the hero who defeated the army of the undead. But, I still don't get how the Federation Council will agree to your terms, whether you're friends with them or not." Marcus grinned. "The usual: money, power, and secrets." "Secrets?" asked an intrigued princess. "Yes." He laughed more to himself. "You see, spying is always a risky game, especially before official trade talks begin." Syra didn't ask any more questions as she had figured out what he meant, at least to some degree. Godwin stood up. He carefully placed a small kiss on Shemishaw's forehead before getting ready to retire himself for the night. Suddenly, there was something like a draft of wind that came blowing through the window. Marcus quickly drew his sword and stood between the shadow of a man and his family. "Who the heck are you? And what are you doing here?" Godwin demanded. "My name is Hakon," the whispery weak voice said faintly. "Hakon? As in the former leader of Nethergate?" Godwin said loudly. The baby woke up and started to cry. Syra reached for her and started to hold the baby closely to herself, her eyes still fully upon this Nethergate intruder. "What do you want?" Marcus said more calmly now, but still very fiercely. Hakon's raspy voice explained, "After we failed to assassinate your family in Sulfalena, I couldn't return to Lord Nyoka without having to pay with my life for this failure. So, I returned to Nagara instead to take part in the civil war, which he created. The fighting there is nearly over. My side has lost. A new sect calling themselves the Nagarist Order has taken power instead. They seem to have convinced the people that this whole war was secretly started by the Queen, that she had given secret orders to the Dragon Horse Cavalry to murder our leadership, and sow the seeds of revolution in our country in hopes of expanding her own power. Now everyone is in a frenzy against those beasts, their riders, and your queen. Get to the part where I am supposed to give a damn and not kill you where you stand for breaking into my house at this hour," Godwin demanded. The baby was still crying, but Syra was muffling the infant in her bosom, not wanting to miss what this fallen assassin was saying. Hakon stepped forward into the candlelight of the table. His arm was clearly injured and bandaged poorly in haste as drops of blood were still dripping forth between the seams. He added, "I came to serve you, your majesty." Both looked at him skeptically. Marcus lifted his blade and was ready to strike. "Wait!" exclaimed the wounded ninja, "Nyoka is gone. My faction has lost. You are all that is left. Warriors of Nethergate only follow strength. And, right now there is no one stronger on this whole continent than the Falanin royal family. You are the keepers of the Sun Rune as well as the ones who defeated Nyoka. And that is the kind of strength I will gladly follow." Hakon concluded with a sound of defeat in his voice. Defeat, but truth. Marcus still didn't like the idea, Syra could tell. However, the idea of the Queen having her own personal group of assassins working in the shadows to execute her royal will was more tempting than Syra could deny. She said to Hakon, "You want to serve me and mine, then prove it to me right here and right now." Hakon smiled. He was prepared for her to say something like this. He unbandaged his wounded right arm. It wasn't a battle wound at all. It was a self-inflicted injury. With his own knife, he had carved a crude image of the Sun Rune into his arm. The wound will heal. But, a scar resembling the true rune would be forever etched onto his flesh. He said, "By my blood and flesh, I vow that my new order shall serve House Phalanus and House Godwin, both for this generation and generations to come." He was looking at the child when he said this part, "Until the Quendam and the royal family are no more. We shall serve you all our days." After these words were spoken, Cyrus started to laugh at him. "Do you doubt me or my words, your highness?" the wounded man asked angrily. The mother with the child in her arms said calmly, "No, of course not. But, you keep speaking in the plural as if there are more than one of you. But you are the last of your kind, for the moment. Go, recruit more to my cause. And when my time on the throne comes, make sure they all know one simple truth: obey their almighty queen. Now, go." Hakon leapt out the window and was gone in a flash, vanishing into the night. "Well now, you certainly handled that one in a bold fashion," Godwin remarked. Syra was not sure if he was being serious or sarcastic, but she responded strongly, "We'll keep him on a short leash. If he is useful for our plans, great. If he is not, then we shall deal with him harshly. My dear wife, I thought becoming a mother would have made you softer, but I am man enough to admit it. I was wrong. No, it has made you even stronger and more cunning. You shall be a great ruler. You shall lead this land into a glorious future both for our daughter and her children to come." War between the Quendam of Falena and the Nagarian theocracy continued off and on for many decades until finally in the solar year 376 something rather unexpected happened. A great earthquake occurred near the border of the two nations. All the main roads necessary for moving large numbers of troops through the mountainous terrain were completely cut off. Many said the earthquake was too strong and powerful, and too precise to be natural. So many began to speculate if it had been done magically or perhaps if it was simply the sun's will for the fighting to stop. Whether by design or chance, there was no way either side could send an army to fight each other without having to cross miles and miles of broken rocks and mountains. Thus it was, that slowly over time the war between Falena and her greatest enemy came to an end. Shortly after this historical event, rumors started to spread of a few strange-looking people that had been seen in that vicinity shortly before the great earthquake. One of them was a beautiful woman, who was hardly dressed. Another was a plain-looking man in tan robes. The last was a short-looking female dressed in Nagarian priestly garb. No one resembling any of these three strangers was ever seen again by the locals. Thus, these rumors about oddly dressed people became merely old wives' tales and stories to entertain children at bedtime. Time gave way to peace. Peace gave way to forgetting for many. But, for those connected closely to these extraordinary events, they never forgot them. Nor did they forget the great hero who defeated an ancient darkness and saved not only the Quendam, but the entire world. The End.